if we're trying to improve our reading speed and our comprehension and our retention, our overall reading efficiency, there's 3 old reading habits that we want to start changing. One of those habits, the first habit, is called fixation. Fixation is something that your eyes do while you're reading words on a page. So you're going one by one, and this fixation, it basically is you look at one word and then another word and another word. And it's a very, very quick herky-jerky motion that your eyes will make, but they stop and go on every word. Why does this happen? When you were first learning how to read, you had to go word by word because you had to break a word down. If you had a word like the word university, you looked at that word and you went like university, and then you focused on the next one. Now it's just a quick split second that you focus, but this habit of fixation, there's a problem with it because as you build up your vocabulary, like the word university, you've seen that word probably thousands of times. Well, you're actually capable of grabbing groups of words because you're familiar with, think about it like this. When you're driving, let's say you were driving and you saw a sign that said New York City. How many times would your eyes fixate on those 3 words? They wouldn't fixate on 3 words. They would fixate on one sign because you have peripheral vision. You can basically look and you see 3 words at a time, no problem. So we're actually capable of reading groups of words. All we need to do is start applying it to the page, okay? And we're going to work on that. So this first habit of fixation is the first one that we want to start working on. So again, habit number 1 is fixation. Habit number 2. Some of you laughed when I went back to reread. This habit of rereading is called regression. All of us have done this, going back, rereading material, and if you're wondering the statistics on this, the average person goes back about 33% of the time. That means for every 3 hours of reading, what's 33% of 3 hours? 1 out of every 3 hours rereading material. And by the way, this is the average. Some people do this more than average, right? Some people are doing it less than average. If you're reading technical material, this number goes up because you're reading more technical material. So this habit of regression, we want to obviously improve our focus because a lot of times what will happen is you're reading through, you ever read a whole page and you look up like, I have no clue what I just read, right? Someone said all the time. All right? And this is a very frustrating kind of habit. Sometimes, you ever read one sentence and you're like, huh? And then you read it again and you're like, come again? And you try it a 3rd time and you ever read this sentence like 5 times and it's just not sticking for some reason? Well, this habit, there's a couple ways that we're going to try to improve this. One, this habit of regression, we want to improve our focus, obviously, so we don't have to go back as much. Because that's a lot of the reason why we go back. The other reason we go back, sometimes we want to avoid pointless regressions. By pointless regressions, I mean going back when you don't have to go back. Here's what I mean by this. We just said sometimes we've read like one sentence and we didn't understand it and we tried reading it again and we tried reading it again. And after like 4 or 5 times we say, you know what, forget the sentence, I'm just moving on from here, right? Well, this is an example of a pointless regression. You should never go back after just one sentence, and here's why. What are the possibilities? One possibility, if I'm reading one sentence and I didn't understand it, maybe I wasn't focused. That's possible. But isn't it also true that maybe the sentence is not clearly written? Right? That's also possible. You ever see a really long run-on sentence? Those are harder to understand. Well, what about the third possibility? And this happens a lot with reading. Sometimes this sentence makes absolutely no sense until you read the next sentence, right? And then once you finish the paragraph, now it starts making sense. So what I'm advocating here is don't go back after one sentence. The easiest way to limit this right off the bat is try to avoid going back after just one sentence. Try to push through. And when is it a good time to go back? If I read a whole paragraph and I don't know what I just read, then I should definitely go back because that was one big idea, right? But don't go back after one sentence because it's just like when you watch movies. You ever watch a movie that's a little confusing at the beginning, right? Would you stop your DVD player and say, you know what, we got to rewind and rewatch that scene? You wouldn't do this, right? So think of reading the same way. Sometimes you're not supposed to know everything at the beginning, and you'll figure it out through the paragraph. So this habit of regression, everybody's done this. A lot of people do this for an extraordinary period of time. And we said there were 3 habits. The first one, fixation. Second one, regression. The third habit, The reason we saved it for last is because it's the biggest word, and I wanted to impress you with a big word. But also, this is the habit that kind of keeps people from making improvements in their speed. Remember when you were first learning how to read, your teacher would have you read out loud in front of class? How many people remember this dreadful experience? Yes? And I say dreadful because a lot of people don't like reading in front of class because, first of all, it's public speaking, and second of all, if you mess up on words when you're little, your classmates will make fun of you. I remember this specifically because English isn't my first language, it's actually Polish. I grew up here in Chicago on the south side in a Polish neighborhood, didn't speak any English until I had to when I was like 5 or 6. So I remember specifically, if you mess up on words, people make fun of you. The good thing is, you don't have to read out loud forever, right? What does your teacher eventually tell you to do? Say the words silently, right? So the teacher said, why? Because it's annoying. If you have 30 little kids in a room and everyone's reading out loud, it's a little annoying, right? Can you imagine if you went to libraries and everyone's reading out loud? This would not be useful. So we start reading the words silently in our head, and we continue doing this. Most people do it for the rest of their lives. The name of this habit of saying words in your head, again, I told you it was a big word, actually 2 words. It's called auditory reassurance. Auditory reassurance is basically you're reassuring yourself you know something by saying it. When you were little, you used to say it out loud, and then you start saying it in your head. This habit is also known as subvocalization. Subvocalization, auditory reassurance, same thing. We're saying the word silently in our head. Everybody, practically everybody does this. How many people in here hear voices in their head when they read? Doesn't mean you're crazy. Some people, this doesn't mean you have to see a psychiatrist or anything. The good thing is it's your voice. If it's another voice, you're in the wrong session. But this voice in our head of saying word, it's like a confirmation, like, oh, I know that word, I know that word. Now, it's absolutely necessary when you're first learning how to read. You say the word because initially we learn, conversation, right? We learn how to speak, and then we learn how to read. So we take something we already know, learning how to speak and listen and talk, and then we read the words out loud because that simulates that. So this habit of saying words in your head, it's not completely necessary. It's a habit that we need to change. For example, think about it like this. If you're saying all the words in your head, do you actually have to say the word in your head? Think about when you see a stop sign. Do you actually go, stop? No, you see a stop sign and it registers right away. Now, I know the color hints it and the shape, but again, if we go back to that sign that might say New York City, would you actually go New York City? Do you say all of the words on signs that you see? Think about how many ads you see every day. You're not saying every one of these words in your head. A lot of these ads, you see a Nike sign that says Nike. You don't really say, you would be going crazy if you said there's so many ads out there, right? But when we read, we're so used to doing this. This is why it's an old reading habit. This habit of auditory reassurance, we need to change it.